In this particular video, we are going to discuss about unit testing in Angular application. In the previous video, we have discussed about what is the karma and what is the jasmine, what is the basic flow of unit testing in Angular application, how we can configure the karma and jasmine for the Angular application. So we have covered all these things in the previous video. In this particular video, we will try to understand how we can write a Angular test case. So before going ahead, we have to understand some code which I have already added. We have created one component which is the app component. So some code is written there. So first try to understand this code so that we can able to write a unit test case for that. Okay. So in this component you can see, suppose if it is HTML, then you can see that there is a username and the password and there is a submit button. If user will click the submit button, then form will get submit and one method will get called, which is a submit method. In the submit method there is one condition: if this form will be valid, then I am calling one method again. This method comes from the service. So I have injected one service which is the API service. So through this service I am calling one function, one method, and that in the method I am providing some of the argument. Okay, so you can see this is a service, and in that service there is a one method. I am providing the username and password, and based on that it will provide the response. In the real scenario, it can call the API call, and based on the API call it will provide you the response. But in Angular, people are using HTTP. In the real scenario, generally people are using HTTP client to do a API call, and HTTP client will return the observable. So since we doesn't have any API right now, so for the testing purpose I am using here of operator. Of is a creation operator. Okay, with the help of we can create observable. So we are creating an observable because in the real scenario basically API call will happen, then we will get the response as observable. That observable having the data. Okay, so in the data can be status and data, whatever data sending maybe from the backend. So you will get all these things. Okay, so in real scenario there will be API call, but since we doesn't have a right now doesn't have a API, that's why I have used the of operator to create observable. Similar situation. Okay, so here we are using this, we are calling one method, and this method is returning the observable. That's why we are subscribing, and after the subscribing, whatever data we are receiving, we are stored in a variable which is a data. So we are using here the this because, as you know, if you will try to access the method and property of the same class, then you have to use the this. So I have stored it in this data. So this is the basic flow. So we will test the same. What we will test? We will test that if user will provide the username and password, and if they will click the submit button, then uh, what will happen? That API call will happen, of course, if form will be valid. Okay, API call will happen with the help of this service, API service, and post data method, and it will get a response, and finally we will get the response in the data. So we will check this flow, okay, during the unit testing. So we will expect that based on the data we are getting a particular response or not. So this can be a unit test case. So whatever response we will get, we are storing. So we will compare these things. We are expecting the data should be in this way. Like if we will provide this maybe like whatever based on the user data, you will expect the return, some return. Okay, so we will test the same. Now the another thing you can notice, I have initialized the form because I am using here the reactive form, and there is a two way to do a reactive form. One is the form group, and in that form group it can have a lots of form control, but here you have to write the new keyword. So similar code, similar thing you can achieve with the help of the form builder as well. So form builder is injectable, so I have injected, and after that I have used the group method, and then for each of this field, for example user and password, the initialization I have done here. So here is just a variable declaration, and in on ng on init lifecycle hook I have initialized the form. Okay, so initial value for the user will be here empty string. Similarly for the password, initial value is empty string, and then there is some validation is it should be required, username and password both should be required, and then it have a pattern. This pattern need to be valid. What is the pattern is that first character should be in the small letter A to Z, and then it can be A to Z 0 to 9 underscore. Minimum character should be 3, at least 3, and the maximum 13. So this is a pattern, a regex pattern. If this pattern will be valid, means all of this validation like required and the pattern, if both will be valid, then for this user field, this user will be valid. Similarly for the password, it is a required and then validation pattern. At least uh, in the password, A to Z small letter should be present, capital letter should be present, 0 to 9 should be present, and special character should be present, or initial and length of the password should be at least 8 character. Okay, and max to max 12, so it should be in the range of 18 to 12 character, then this pattern will be valid. So based on the use case, right now I have only two like user and password, but in your projects maybe it can be many fields, so based on that there should be validation. So right now if both of this valid, like if this pattern, this validation will be valid, pattern or required, then this will be valid, and if user and password both will be valid, then this form will be valid. So I'm just providing you just background knowledge, so that whenever we will do the unit test case, so you will not face any issue. Okay, so that's why I'm providing you the background knowledge about it. So hopefully you are able to understand, like we have a form and we have initialized the form. So unit test case will be, the scenario will be, suppose if user will type the username and the password, then in that scenario this value need to be updated in the component, in component.ts file. Okay, this should be updated. So we will check this scenario, this is happening or not. Another scenario can be using the set value or maybe patch value. If you will update the form, then in that case the same thing need to be reflected in this HTML part, because this HTML part actually will be loaded into the DOM, and if you will update the form using the set value or maybe patch value, then that data need to be shown into the DOM. Okay, so you will check the same, you will use the set value or patch value. Set value is basically in that case what will happen, for all of this field you have to provide like you have to update all of this field, and for the patch value you can update a particular field. So this is the basic difference. So this actually background knowledge required during the testing. So I hope you understand. Now you will check this scenario, that if you will update, then this is reflecting into the DOM, into the HTML part or not. So this can be a scenario. So we will check all of this scenario, uh, uh, maybe in your case it can be a lots of method and property. So you will check all of that. So if there is a method, and if method is you are providing the argument, and based on the argument you are expecting the data, you are expecting the output. So output is based on your expectation or not. You will check this test case. So there will be all the scenario. Okay, for example, uh, let's say this one. This is the lead code actually. Okay, it's all right. So just I am going to open this one. So I have written one logic. Okay, I have written one logic, and this logic is actually working perfectly fine, but there is something is not uh, in some cases is not working fine. So you can see in the 45 cases it is working fine, and the scenario which is in one scenario it's get failed. So in 45 scenario it get passed, and one scenario it get failed. So we are provided the input and expecting the output this one, but actual output we will get the undefined. It means test case is failed. Okay, so we understand that, yeah, in this scenario, in this particular scenario, it's not like our code is not working. So for this scenario we will add a code, we will modify the code to make sure that this test case should be passed. So I have made the changes in this scenario. What will happen? What happened, friends? In the second time, you can see, the 54 scenario get passed, but again in another scenario it's get failed. Okay, it get failed. Suppose in this case I am expecting the value like this. If you will provide the input in this way, then output should be this one, but I got a output this one, so it get failed. So I have added this scenario once again. So I have modified our logic, and now after the modification, finally you can see all the test cases get passed. You can see here all the 57 test case got passed. So friends, why I am showing these things? So main reason of showing these things because for each of this scenario, like for you are testing maybe a method or maybe anything, so you will consider all of this scenario, and based on that you have to write the unit test case. Okay, so that if any changes will be occurred, and any so that your test case will get failed, and you have to modify your logic accordingly. So there are lots of work. You have to like write each of this scenario. Again, there are lots of benefit of writing unit test case. Okay, so what is the benefit? Because if you will write all this scenario, then it's very time consuming, friend. So what will happen if you are using the if you are working on big enterprise application, then in that case, if new developer came, so for new developer the one feature is assigned, that their responsibility is to create one particular feature. They are developing that feature, and in, uh, in some cases it can be happen that they have to make certain changes in the existing code. So they make the changes in the existing code, or they think that after that making changes, they will check the condition, like if previous code is working fine or not. After making the changes in the previous code, their existing feature, like current feature which is they are developing, is start working absolutely fine, so they can make the changes in the previous code. So if suppose there is a no unit test case, then what will happen? So in my case you can see that I thought that I have written the code, and I thought that this code is actually working fine, because I test some of the scenario and it's worked fine. So I think that, yeah, it's working fine, but in but actually in some scenario it get failed. So in the similarly they will make the certain changes in the previous code, and they think that if it is working absolutely fine, then but the rare situation, it doesn't comes, it can comes in the production. So friends, I will create the next video. So thank you for watching. Be tuned for the next video.